Most people spend their lives chasing attention, posting more, talking louder, trying harder to stand out. Yet within moments, they are forgotten. But then there are others who speak rarely, move quietly, and somehow linger in your mind long after they leave the room. What makes the difference? It's not wealth, it's not beauty, it's not charm. It's something far simpler, yet far more powerful. It's a set of skills anyone can develop, skills that make people think of you, even when you're not around. If you've ever wondered why some people stay unforgettable, while others vanish into the noise, you're about to discover the truth. The first skill that makes people think of you is the ability to listen deeply. Most people only half listen, waiting for their turn to speak, distracted by their own thoughts. But when you give someone your full attention, when you make them feel heard, something rare happens. You stand out. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that we should put ourselves in the minds of others, not just in our own. Listening is how we do that. Imagine sitting with someone who doesn't interrupt, doesn't rush, doesn't judge, but simply listens as if your words matter. That moment stays with you. It makes you remember them long after. In a noisy world full of people trying to shout louder, the one who stays quiet and listens becomes unforgettable. This isn't about pretending to care or using silence as a tactic. It's about genuinely setting your ego aside for a few minutes to value another human being. When you can do that, you'll carry a presence that people will always recall because they'll connect you with the rare experience of being truly understood. The second skill that makes people think of you is clarity in speech. Words can either confuse or enlighten, weaken or strengthen. Many people talk in circles, filling the air with noise but saying very little. The Stoics understood that words should be tools of precision, not decoration. Seneca once said that speech should be like a coin, simple, clear, and carrying value. When you speak with clarity, people don't have to guess your meaning. They trust you because your words feel grounded, not inflated. Think about the conversations you remember most. They weren't filled with jargon or complicated phrases, but with simple truths spoken plainly. Clarity doesn't mean speaking often. It means choosing your words carefully, making each one count. When you remove exaggeration, avoid gossip, and resist the temptation to impress, your speech becomes sharp and steady, like a blade that cuts through confusion. People will think of you not because you spoke the loudest, but because your words carried weight. In a world overflowing with chatter, the person who speaks clearly is remembered. The third skill that makes people think of you is the ability to listen deeply. Most people hear only enough to prepare their reply, waiting for their turn to speak. But true listening is different. It requires stillness of the mind and the discipline to hold back your own voice. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself not to rush to judgment, but to pause, observe, and understand. When you listen this way, you give others something rare, your full presence. People can feel it when you're not distracted, when you're not waiting to interrupt, but when you're genuinely paying attention. They feel respected, and respect is something they do not forget. Listening deeply doesn't mean you agree with everything said, but it shows that you value the person enough to hear them fully. It's like offering them a mirror where they can see themselves more clearly, and often in that space of being heard, they come to their own solutions. The one who listens more than they speak leaves a quiet but powerful mark. Long after words fade, people remember how they felt in your presence, and they will think of you as someone who gave them that gift. The fourth skill that makes people think of you is clarity in speech. Words are powerful, but they lose their force when tangled in confusion or wasted in excess. The Stoics valued brevity, saying only what was necessary, no more, no less. Seneca wrote that speech should be like a coin, small, solid, and valuable. When you speak with clarity, you cut through the noise. Instead of dressing ideas in decoration, you bring them forward plainly. People are drawn to this because clarity is rare. In a world full of chatter, someone who speaks with calm precision stands out. This doesn't mean being cold or blunt. It means speaking with honesty, care, and purpose. When you share your thoughts without overcomplication, people understand you, and understanding builds trust. Think about leaders, teachers, or mentors who left a mark on you. Was it their endless talking, or was it the way they could say one sentence that stayed with you for years? Clear speech has weight. It travels further in the mind than 1,000 empty words. Those who master it are remembered not just for what they said, but for how they made others feel understood. The fifth skill that makes people think of you is the ability to listen deeply. Most people hear, but few truly listen. When you listen without rushing to respond, without planning your answer while the other person speaks, you give them something rare, your full presence. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to put aside his own judgments long enough to understand the perspective of others. Listening in this way does not mean you must agree with everything. It means you respect another person's humanity enough to let them express themselves fully. People remember the ones who made them feel heard. This kind of listening is not passive. It requires patience, restraint, and attention. You watch their eyes, notice their tone, and sense the meaning behind the words. It is like standing still in a flowing river, letting the current pass over you instead of fighting it. When you master listening, people seek your presence not only for advice, but for comfort. They trust that with you, they will not be dismissed or ignored. Deep listening creates bonds, resolves conflict, and brings calm to heated situations. Long after words fade, the memory of being truly listened to lingers. The sixth skill that makes people think of you is clarity in your words. Many people talk in circles, dressing up their thoughts in unnecessary details or vague expressions. But when you speak with precision, when your words are simple, clear, and grounded, people notice. Seneca once said that speech should be like light, cutting through the dark without excess, showing the way plainly. Clarity requires that you first understand your own thoughts. If your mind is tangled, your words will be as well. But if you take the time to strip away what is not essential, what remains carries weight. People remember the ones who can explain a complicated matter simply. They return to those who can speak without confusion, because in a noisy world, clarity is a form of strength. Speaking clearly does not mean being harsh. It means choosing words that fit the truth without distortion, words that align with your actions. When you develop this skill, your presence becomes sharper, more commanding, because others know that when you speak, you mean something. And that sense of directness stays with them long after the conversation ends. The seventh skill that makes people think of you is listening with depth. Most people only half listen, waiting for their turn to speak, or letting their mind drift while the other person talks. But when you truly listen with patience and attention, you set yourself apart. Marcus Aurelius wrote about understanding others without judgment, seeing them as they are. To listen deeply is not just to hear the words, but to sense the meaning beneath them, the emotions and concerns that might not be spoken aloud. This kind of listening makes others feel valued because it shows restraint and humility. It is easy to speak, but harder to quiet the noise in your own mind and give another person the gift of your full focus. Those who master this skill often become trusted, because people know they will not just be heard but understood. And when you listen this way, you also sharpen your own mind, learning from others, and gathering perspectives that would otherwise be lost. In silence and attention, you grow, and people remember the calm presence of someone who listens without haste. The eighth skill that makes people think of you is the ability to stay calm under pressure. Many lose themselves when life grows chaotic. Voices rise, tempers flare, and decisions become reckless. But the one who remains steady becomes the anchor in the storm. Seneca once wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and much of panic comes from feeding fear rather than facing facts. When you stay calm, you show others that chaos does not control you. Think of the battlefield commander who, even in fire and confusion, speaks clearly and gives direction. Or the doctor who steadies their hands while others tremble. Calmness is not coldness, it is controlled strength. It is the refusal to let emotions dictate reason. By practicing stillness in small moments, pausing before you react, breathing when you feel anger rising, you train yourself for the greater trials. And when those trials come, people remember you as the one who did not break, the one who turned panic into clarity. Calm is rare, and because of that, it is unforgettable. The ninth skill that makes people think of you is the ability to listen deeply. Most people only wait for their turn to speak. They hear words, but they do not truly understand. But when you listen with full presence, you give others something rare, your attention without distraction. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to be tolerant of others and patient in hearing them out. Listening is more than silence. It is engaging without judgment, drawing out what a person truly means, not just what they say. Imagine how it feels when someone really hears you, when they pause, reflect, and respond thoughtfully rather than rushing ahead. That experience lingers in the mind and heart. Deep listening also makes you wiser, because you gather more from each encounter than those who are quick to interrupt. It builds trust, because people sense they can speak openly with you. And it makes you memorable, because true listeners are so rare. Words may be forgotten, but the feeling of being heard remains, and it is tied to the one who gave that gift. Listening, then, is not weakness, it is influence. It quietly places you in the memory of others long after the conversation ends. The 10th skill that makes people think of you is the ability to remain calm under pressure. Life will always bring storms, arguments, setbacks, disappointments, and sudden challenges. Most people react with panic, anger, or anxiety. But the one who stays composed stands out like a rock in the middle of crashing waves. The Stoics often compared life's troubles to a fire. You can either be consumed by it or use it to forge yourself into something stronger. Calmness does not mean indifference. It means control over yourself when the world tries to control you. Imagine two people faced with the same crisis. One breaks down, the other speaks slowly, thinks clearly, and guides others forward. Which one will be remembered? Calmness creates trust because people feel safe around those who do not lose themselves to chaos. It creates respect because it shows mastery over the hardest thing of all, your own emotions. And it creates presence because in moments when everything shakes, the one who stands still becomes impossible to ignore. The 11th skill that makes people think of you is the ability to truly listen. Most people don't actually listen. They wait for their turn to speak, rehearsing their own thoughts while the other person's words pass by unheard. But when you listen with patience and attention, you make the other person feel valued, understood, and respected. This is a rare gift in a world that constantly demands to be heard, but seldom offers silence in return. The Stoics believed in the discipline of paying attention not only to nature and reason, but also to others. Listening sharpens your judgment, teaches you more than speaking, and builds deeper bonds than clever words ever could. Imagine the difference between someone who nods absent-mindedly and someone who leans in, absorbs your words, and pauses before responding. The second person is unforgettable because they make you feel that your voice matters. And when you practice this kind of listening, you carry an invisible strength. People trust you more, they share more with you, and they think of you long after the conversation has ended. The 12th skill that leaves a lasting mark is the art of restraint. In a world where people rush to react, to comment, to defend themselves at the slightest provocation, the person who holds back displays a strength that cannot be ignored. Restraint is not weakness, it is mastery over the self. Marcus Aurelius wrote that it is not what happens to us that harms us, but how we respond. By choosing not to lash out, not to speak in anger, not to give in to impulse, you set yourself apart. Think of a storm. Most people are like loose leaves blown wildly by the wind, but the restrained person is the rooted oak that stands firm. Restraint creates dignity. It makes people think of you as measured, calm, and trustworthy. In conversations, silence at the right moment can carry more weight than 1,000 words. In conflict, choosing not to escalate earns more respect than shouting ever could. And in daily life, exercising restraint over your desires, whether for attention, for possessions, or for victory, shows that you are ruled not by passions, but by reason. People remember this quality because it is rare and because it inspires them to ask themselves, how do they remain so steady? The 13th and final skill that makes people think of you long after you've left is consistency. Anyone can have a good day, a moment of clarity, or a burst of inspiration. But the person who shows up again and again with steadiness, who speaks and acts with the same integrity across time, becomes unforgettable. Consistency is not glamorous, but it is deeply respected. The Stoics valued this above fleeting bursts of energy because they understood that character is revealed not in one decision, but in the 1,000 small ones made daily. When you are consistent in your kindness, in your discipline, in your reliability, people trust you. They begin to count on you, not because you are perfect, but because you are steady. This trust builds influence without you needing to force it. Consider the sunrise. No matter the storms or the clouds, it always returns, day after day, quietly and faithfully. A consistent person becomes like that to others, a source of grounding, a quiet reminder that stability still exists in an unstable world. And in time, that quiet strength is what lingers in their memory long after the words themselves are gone. When we bring these 10 skills together, we begin to see a pattern. They are not tricks or tactics meant to manipulate people. They are habits of thought and action that grow from a calm and disciplined mind. Each one, listening deeply, speaking with clarity, showing restraint, being reliable, practicing humility, pulls us closer to the kind of person others naturally admire and remember. These skills echo the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, who reminded himself daily to live as if each action were his last. What you choose to practice each day builds the person you become. And the person you become leaves an impression that outlives your words. Think about those you remember most vividly. It is not because they demanded attention, but because they carried themselves with strength, calm, and purpose. The same can be true for you. If you weave even a few of these skills into your life, people will not only notice you, they will think of you when you are gone, because you will have shown them what steadiness, wisdom, and inner strength look like in action. If this gave you something valuable to carry into your day, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next lesson.